It's always good to welcome Walter Block of Loyola University to the show, and today we're discussing yet another one of his books. Is titled Water Capitalism: The Case for Privatizing Oceans, Rivers, Lakes, and Aquifers, which he edited with Peter Lothian Nelson. Walter,
Uh,
welcome
co
to the show again.
Let me say a correction, co-authored, not edited.
Okay, co-author. Okay, my the cover, the version of the book I got, it says edited by, but
Really?
yeah. So yeah, just to cross check. But okay, so co-authored by Peter Lothian Nelson. Okay, Walter, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me back. It's always a pleasure.
Yes, the pleasure is always mine. So tell me about the co-author, Peter Lothian Nelson.
Well, I don't know much about water pressure and I don't know stuff with water. I'm an economist, not a waterite, and I'm writing a book about water, and I don't really know that stuff. Whereas he is a engineer of liquids, so he knows about I don't know water moving around and how heavy it is and what is an acre foot and all sorts of stuff like that. Plus, he's a libertarian, and the two of us just got together. I think this third co-authorship. We also did another one on space, which maybe in a month you and I can do again.
Of course.
And we got together and we wrote a book on why we should privatize water. And he was very helpful. That's an understatement. That's a negative thing to say. He was a partner. And I think it's a good book. And I think that not too many free enterprise people, when they think of privatization, do they think about oceans, rivers, lakes, and aquifers and mud puddles and stuff like that. So it's a little unique. I'm sure there are other libertarians who would agree with this, but I think we've made a beachhead somewhere where no one else has. So I'm very happy with the book, and I'm happy with the reactions to it, and I'm happy to discuss it with you now on your show.
Certainly. Yeah, it's certainly a novel idea, even amongst libertarian circles. But you're basically talking about privatizing this. I'm holding a cup of water for those who are listening, and you're holding a bottle of water.
Well, this water is private,
Yes.
and your I don't know about your water. It might have come from the tap.
Yes.
I don't know where you got your water, but this is sold to me, so it's totally private water.
Mhm.
But and happily that's private because if the government was supplying that, we'd be in trouble. But the government does supply tap water,
Mhm.
and whenever government supplies anything, I don't say it's horrible. And I mean, we're still alive, and without water, we'd be dead in what, 2, 3 days, something like that. Air is the only thing that's more important. Without air, 2 or 3 minutes, we'd be dead. Water, 2 or 3 days, I'm not sure, something like that. And no orange juice or apple juice either, because it's mostly water. So water is very important, and whenever government sticks its paw in it, it's less good than if it were private.
Totally. Yeah. So, uh, who should be the provider of tap water in your view?
Well, the owner, whoever the owner is, and the way we would establish ownership among libertarians is we go back to John Locke, and John Locke said uh, he is. I'm putting words in his mouth. This is the gist of it. He is the proper owner of it who first mixed his labor with it. I mean, who first used it? Let's take an example: the Mississippi River. Who should own the Mississippi River? Right now, the government owns it. Why do I pick on the Mississippi River? Because the Mississippi River owners, the Army Corps of Engineers, killed 1,900 people during Katrina. Now, Katrina didn't really hit on the Mississippi River. It hit 40 miles east of New Orleans. I'm in New Orleans now, but it was so ferocious that it knocked down buildings 40 miles away. And as a result, the levees, which held the Mississippi River away from New Orleans, fell. The levees were weak. New Orleans is lower than the water level. So when the levees that are holding the river back fall, New Orleans gets inundated and 1,900 people died. And my answer would be if private owners of the Mississippi River allowed that, they'd be out of business. We'd have someone else. But the Army Corps of Engineers are still in business, so that's a problem. And so, who should own the Mississippi River? I got distracted. Well, the people that use it. And in the book, we say something of the order of, well, everybody who has land on either side of the Mississippi River, and it goes right down to the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf of America. I'm not sure what Gulf it is anymore, up to, I don't know, Minnesota, somewhere up there where it starts. I don't know how many people own land on the side of the river, let's say 100,000 for round numbers. Well, they should each get a vote in the new Mississippi River Corporation based on how many miles or whatever it is, quarter miles, half miles, who knows, of frontage that they have on the ground, that if they have frontage, they must have used it somehow. They must have stuck a fishing pole in there or had a boat or something. And then I don't know if you're familiar with Mississippi River. It's right near me, so I see it all the time. There are these gigantic boats that go up and down, up and down. Well, they're using it. They should get a share of this corporation, the Mississippi River Corporation. And now, who else should get it? I don't know. If you swam in it once, maybe you get a tenth of a share. I don't know. These are details. And I'm more concerned about the principles because we're nowhere near privatizing the Mississippi River. Donald Trump is not thinking about this. When and if it was on the books or we were about to do it, then we'd have to figure out, well, who gets how many shares of the Mississippi River. Right now, we're just talking theoretical. And so let's say we have 200,000 people who own the Mississippi River. They have one share each, and they have a board of directors, and they're listed on the stock exchange. And it's just like any other corporation that owns liquid. Well, what other corporations own liquid? Oil companies, orange juice companies own liquid, apple juice companies own liquid. There's nothing unique about liquid such that you shouldn't be able to own it. Whereas I think most people say, what are you, crazy? You can't own water, maybe with the exception of this and what you got in your cup. The idea that you can own the Mississippi River, they're going to wonder, I just put a cough drop. They're going to wonder what's in these cough drops. And now I'm not talking about libertarians. I'm talking about the average person who would say, you're out to lunch. You're just lunatic. You can't own the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River belongs to all the people or something like that. And I say, well, if it belongs to all the people, how about those 1,900 people who died because of government ownership or mismanagement or whatever you want to call it?
Right. So, under private ownership of, say, the Mississippi River, who should be responsible when, say, a disaster like what happened with the levees in Katrina happens?
Well, the owners. The owners would be responsible. Now, look, there is such a thing as an act of God. I'm an atheist. I'm using it in the way that people use it. And, if lightning strikes somebody's boat on the Mississippi River, it's not the Mississippi River's fault, the Mississippi River owner's fault. So you have to be reasonable. You can't sue somebody for that sort of a thing. Similarly, if lightning hits my forest and now it puts on fire your house, well, I mean, these are technical legal issues as to who you can sue for what. But if my Mississippi River Corporation, I'm the president of it now, and I put in levees and the levees fall, well, then the courts would decide, was it such that it was an act of God and nobody could have stopped it? In which case I'm not responsible, or I could have protected my clients who live in New Orleans. So that would be a legal issue. But the point is that whenever you look, if McDonald's, God forbid, killed 1,900 people, forget about whether they'd be sued or not. There certainly would be, and I think successfully. But they would be out of business. There'd be new management for McDonald's. All the capital goods would go elsewhere, and other people would run them. So what I'm saying is that I don't know for sure, but there's a tendency that whenever you make a mistake, you lose. Thomas Sowell, one of my favorite mentors, has this wonderful aphorism or saying. He says it's a stupid, I'm giving the gist, by I don't have the exact words. It's a stupid system to have where if you make a mistake, you pay no penalty. Well, who paid a penalty for this? The Army Corps of Engineers didn't pay a penalty unless they were one of the 1,900 people who died, but uh, they're still in business. They paid no penalty, and there was no question of a penalty. Whereas under private ownership, this would be on the table. And if it's on the table, it's salutary, and it'll satisfy Thomas Sowell, a genius of economics.
Okay. Now, still on the topic of the Mississippi River, how should the different rights of, say, usage of the area be negotiated? Because the river is not just a body of water. It's used for obviously water traffic, so boats and ships go through it. Uh, but also, say, fishing. Who has the rights to the fishes? Uh,
Well, the owners, and what they would do is, I'm not sure how they would do it. Would they charge you by the fish you caught, or by the hours you fished, or what? I don't know. That would be an entrepreneurial decision, not an economic decision. And they would also charge the boats. You want to have a big fat boat, and I have a little skinny boat, you might have to pay more. Previously we did an episode on private roads. And in the private roads, you'll remember probably that the earliest roads were private, and they charged based on this is during the horse and buggy era, how many axles you had in your cart, how many horses were pulling it, and also the width of the wheel. Because if the wheel was wide, you'd sort of smooth down the road. These are dirt roads. Whereas if the wheel was narrow, think ice skates, you put ruts in the road. So they'd even charge you based on the width of the wheel. So extrapolating from that, surely if I have a big boat, I pay more. You have a smaller boat, you pay less. If I go 100 miles, I pay less than you who went 200 miles. I'm presuming, but again, these are things for contractual things. And I assume that it would be the same as, a hotel. If you get the bridal suite for a week, you're going to pay more than I who get one little room for a day. Now, if all hotels were now government owned and I was a maniac saying, well, we should privatize hotels, I can only speculate as to how much they would charge for each square footage and how many nights and all that.
right. I think until now, the only cases of privatized bodies of water I can think of is, say, if you have like a compound and you make like an artificial lake, and certainly you have the right to that body of water. But in terms of natural bodies of water, uh, so who gets first dibs, so to speak?
Well, even there, I have to correct you because if you have a little pond of a half acre or something like that, heck, even if you have a mud puddle, they're going to come after you, the government.
Okay.
And they're going to say this is part of the internal waterways and we're going to now regulate you. I mean, it's just crazy. So that's a lunatic thing that the government does, to extend their ownership in effect. But otherwise, natural bodies of water, one of them would be the Mississippi River, another one would be the Great Lakes, Lake Superior, or the right near me, Lake Pontchartrain, which isn't as big as Superior, but it's right near me. It's 25 miles north and south, and maybe 40 miles east and west. I mean, it's a sizable lake. Who owns it? Well, the people who had land on all the sides around it, on the periphery, and then the people who used it, they would own it in the same format as we were talking about with the river. Now, let me talk a little bit about the ocean because Robert Nozick, who we revere as one of our leaders, made fun of this idea. What he said, again, I forget his exact words, but I got the gist of it, the paraphrase. What he said is if you pour a can of tomato juice, I think it was tomato juice, if you pour a can of tomato juice in the ocean, you don't own anything of the ocean. You just wasted your tomato juice. Namely, he was making fun of the idea of owning the Atlantic or the Pacific or the Indian, Antarctic Ocean, whatever. And now I have to tell you a story about the oceans. It was Star Trek. Are you into Star Trek? The movie?
I like to watch it. So tell me about the episode.
One of the episodes was our guys were from the 23rd century. I'm not sure which century, but they were from the 23rd century. And the guys in the 25th century were kicking their butt. Why were the guys in the 25th century against Spock and Jim and all those people? Because there were no more whales. And they blamed the 23rd century, our Star Trek people. They blamed that for that. So what our boys, Spock and all the characters, they went back to the 20th century. And Spock had to put something around his ears so that you wouldn't see his pointy ears. And what they did is they grabbed some whales and then they brought the whales from the 20th century back to the 23rd century or forward to the 23rd century. And then the 25th century, people lightened up. And the 25th century, people were much more technologically advanced. So that, the more time goes on, the more advanced the society is. So that's how the movie ended. They brought there was a whole bunch of, which spaceship would hold the whales and all that. But the key is they brought the whales back. Well, why are the whales going extinct? There is this thing called the tragedy of the commons. What's the tragedy of the commons? Tragedy of the commons is when we own stuff individually, like you own that water individually, and I own this water individually. We take a sip once in a while. But suppose that there was a big bottle of water and there were 10 people around and each person had a straw. They would use it faster because they would be afraid that the other guy would grab it first. So that's one example. Another example of the tragedy of the commons is if I own a pasture for my cows, I don't let the cows eat right down to the roots because then the grass won't regrow. I'll every 7 year I'll save 1/7 of my land to make sure it goes back. Whereas if 10 people have a commons, they're not going to have that incentive to save the thing because if I am a good guy and I save the grass, you dirty rat, are going to come in with your cows and gobble up all the grass that I didn't gobble, my cows didn't gobble up. So the tragedy of the commons dissipates resources. Well, we own the oceans in common and we own the whales in common. You're not allowed to own a whale. Now, even a very moderate position would be you can own a whale. How do you own a whale? You shoot into the whale some sort of electronic device. Look, before we had barbed wire, how did we make sure your cows were different than my cows? We branded them. Well, this would be a form of branding. Now this whale is my whale. You keep off. Now, was there cow rustling? There was always cow rustling, but you still have private property. Would there be whale rustling? Probably. But most people are not criminals. And if they respect the idea that, this is my whale, that's your whale, you keep off my whale, I'll keep off your whale, then the whales won't disappear. They won't go extinct. But if they're owned in common, then there is that danger. And also with fish stocks. It's an interesting thing. There was this bet between Julian Simon and Paul Ehrlich. Are we running out of resources? And the decision was we're running out of resources if the price of resources rise, and if they fall, we're not running out. And Simon won the bet. Simon was our guy, the good guy. Paul Ehrlich was the left-wing environmentalist. And then Paul Ehrlich said to Simon, let's have another bet. We're running out of fish. And Simon said, can we count farm fish? And if we count farm fish, all of a sudden, Simon is not a total idiot. Paul Ehrlich is not a total idiot. He stopped wanting the bet. The point is, when you have farm fish, there's no tragedy of the commons. For all the fish that are running around in the ocean, I don't know, we human beings get 1 or 2% of them. For all the fish that are floating around in a fish farm, we get 99% of them. Because the sharks get some, and. So when you own it privately, you care for it, you protect it, and you don't get extinction. Whether with buffalo versus cows or alligators, when the buffalo were not allowed to be owned, they almost went extinct. When the alligators were not allowed to be owned privately, they almost went extinct. And happily, the law changed, and now you can. And it's the same with the Botswana and the elephants. Botswana in Africa is the most free enterprise country, and their herds are increasing because they allow some sort of quasi, demi, semi-private ownership of the elephants. So it's the same thing. I mean, a whale is just an elephant with fins, as far as the economist is concerned. And what I'm saying is that not only should we privatize the whales, but we should privatize the entire ocean, which is a little premature because you only want to privatize stuff that's scarce. We don't want to privatize the air. On Mars and on the moon, when we get there, you're going to have to privatize air. But right now, we don't, I'm not advocating privatizing air. There'll be no book from me that we should have air private because air is not now scarce. And oceans are sort of semi quasi scarce based on the traffic in the oceans. And we're getting there. So this is, I'm not saying we should privatize the oceans right now, but I'm saying, this is the spirit of libertarianism, to privatize everything. I even have a hat. I should have worn this hat. It says privatize everything. And my motto is if it moves, privatize it. If it doesn't move, privatize it. And since everything either moves or doesn't move, privatize everything. Everything that's scarce. I mean, you can't put everything in the hat on the front of the hat.
Yeah, I think the topic of ocean privatization might be a good jumping off point because there are disputes happening in our oceans and our seas. I'm thinking of China's as territorial disputes with many nations, including my home country of Vietnam, regarding the use of oceans. They've built artificial islands, for example, in order to lay claim to the water territory. So I wonder, to what extent is the construction of artificial islands a violation of, I guess, national sovereignty or an example of the homesteading principle?
Well, I wrote an article on just that issue. So I'm glad you brought it up. It's not in the book. It came about after the book was published, but I'm still interested in the subject. I'm sort of ambivalent. On the one hand, China is a good guy because what China is doing is privatizing the oceans, sort of. Well, governmentalizing it. It's nationalizing it. It's not really privatizing, but at least they're getting out of the tragedy of the commons. So what they do is they make an island, and the island is, I don't know, 1 square mile or a quarter-mile square, something very small. What it is, it's based on some sort of ridge that when the water is this high, the ridge is under it, and then when the water is low, it's above. So what they do is they pour in a whole bunch of gravel and rocks, and they build up a little island. And then they have this view that if you own an island, you own 12 miles around. Where'd they get 12 miles? Well, national law, international law first said you own 1 mile. Why 1 mile? Because that's as far as a cannon could go. In the 1800s, a cannon could only go 1 mile. Then it was 2 miles. Then it became 12 miles. Now with the ICBMs, the whole thing is silly. But remember, I said that if you live on the periphery of a lake or a river, you own a share. Well, you own more than just the little island. You own a little bit around of water, something. So they're getting us out of the tragedy of the commons, and for that, I have to congratulate them. On the other hand, what they're doing is telling people, well, now you can't move your ships here and there because we have 12 miles and we have a lot of islands and now we've covered everything. So we own the whole kit and caboodle. Well, that's not exactly the way we should go. When I'm thinking of privatizing, I'm not thinking of the government of China doing it. I'm thinking of people like you and me and Robert Nozick. He passed away, but people like individuals who would then not monopolize it and not forbid any traffic kind of a thing. Namely, the people, just as I said, maybe 200,000 people should own the Mississippi River, and therefore nobody's going to say, well, oh, you're in Iowa, we're not letting you in. Because the Iowans own a part of the Mississippi River. So if Vietnam and Cambodia and China and other countries around there, Philippines, somewhere around there, all owned it together. Privately, there would be none of this monopolization and forbidding traffic. Another area where there's forbidding of traffic in the oceans is what is it? Israel is prohibited from going in the Red Sea because of the issues of Israel and Gaza and all that. So you're quite right that there is controversy, and this means that it's becoming scarce. But in the middle of, I don't know, the Pacific or the middle of the Atlantic, there's not enough traffic yet so that we could say, well, it's becoming scarce and we have to privatize it now. But south of China and south of Vietnam, south of Cambodia, and is that the Indian Ocean or the South China Sea, something like that? What's it
Yeah,
called?
South China Sea.
Okay, well, we're ready to privatize because that's scarce. There are a lot of people that want it. So that's the definition of lack of scarcity. I mean, scarcity means nobody wants it. But the South China Sea is a prime case for privatization, as we're mentioning.
Okay. Well, and so who should get the privatization rights?
Well, the privatization rights should belong to, I don't know, 10 million people who live within a mile of the ocean. And we should have a corporation called the South China Sea Corporation. And it should be run in behalf of all the owners. You living in, you might not live on the shore of Vietnam. You might live inland and you wouldn't be an owner. But if you live near the ocean and we could claim that you use the ocean somehow, you fish in it, you swim in it, whatever, you would be one of the owners of the South China Sea. And there'd be, I don't know, 20 million people, and it would be listed on a stock exchange, and it would be like any other owner of a liquid resource like oil or orange juice or whatever.
Okay. So do you foresee a future where, say, people of a certain amount of wealth would create artificial islands amongst the sea as a way of homesteading it and
Well,
cultivating it?
they wouldn't have to do that. I mean, right now they're doing it, and that's a way of getting us out of the tragedy of the commons. But they wouldn't have to build islands. You see, right now they're building islands not for the island's sake, as I understand it. They're building islands only to grab the water. So building islands in order to grab water is silly. It's wasteful. Building islands for island's sake is fine if the owners of the ocean allow that. The owners of the ocean might say, "Look, we got too many islands. We don't need any more islands, and we're going to charge you to build an island, just like we're going to charge you for your ships going around." So the building of islands is sort of an artificial, non-libertarian way of homesteading. It's what we got now, but again, it's not private homesteading. It's the homesteading of the Chinese government, which is not exactly free enterprise. Although, on the other hand, it used to be that the Chinese government was very socialistic. Mao was a commie, and the whole country was communist. There's this movie, The Mouse That Roared, uh,
Haven't heard about it. No.
a movie, The Mouse That Roared.
Okay. Yeah, tell me about it.
What happened was Peter Sellers played all the roles. And Peter Sellers was the queen. He was the queen. And it was a country like Liechtenstein. And at the end of World War II, the US was giving all sorts of aid to conquered countries in Europe. And they wanted some foreign aid. So they wrote to the Washington, D.C., and you see a picture of Peter Sellers as a bureaucrat in Washington now, sort of looking at this and ripping it up, and never heard of Liechtenstein. It was a different country, like Liechtenstein or Monaco. And then finally, the Queen, sent the army over to the U.S. on the grounds that we would declare, first they declared war on the U.S., and the U.S. ignored it. And the idea was, let's declare war on the US, and then the US will conquer us, and then they'll give us money. So what happened is that Peter Sellers went over with about 12 soldiers, and don't ask, but they conquered the US. And there was a wonderful telephone call between the Queen Peter Sellers, and the general, Peter Sellers. And the Queen was saying, "You idiot! You weren't supposed to win the war. You were supposed to lose the war." It's just a great comedy. So that was the mouse that roared, namely the Liechtenstein country beat the US. So what's happening in China? The claim is that Hong Kong is the mouse and it roared and it conquered China. Now it's true, China took it over politically, but the system of Hong Kong permeated all throughout China, and now China is one of the most free enterprise countries in the world. Well, I might be exaggerating a little bit, but they're no more commies. It's not a Maoist country anymore. It's a different kind of a country. You know more about that better than I do. You're a neighbor of China. I'm not. But that was the mouse that roared. So Hong Kong took over China, and China is now a lot more free enterprise than it used to be. So I'm a little happier with them taking over the South China Sea than if Mao did it. Still, there are problems with Taiwan and all, as you well know. But the idea here is that, so I'm ambivalent about China making little islands and owning the ocean. On the one hand, I want the ocean owned. I don't want it under the tragedy of the commons. On the other hand, I don't want the Chinese government to own it. I want ordinary people like you and I to own it.
Okay. Yeah. So just a little pushback on the tragedy of the commons view of things. Just an example off the top of my head. Say if you find say a ghost town somewhere in Louisiana, I'm assuming that's where you are, and you found a new town, say Blockville or Blockheads or something like that, and you allow people to move in to take up residence in it. Um, I wonder to what extent is are you, say, the owner of, say, Blockheads or Blockville, and the other people are just happen to be renters, or are they residents and the Blockville is a town shared by everybody who lives there?
First of all, I correct you about the name. It's called Blockheadville.
Okay, Blockheadville. Okay, that sounds
Right.
better.
Now, let's take two cases. One, I go to virgin territory that's never been occupied in the middle of Wyoming and the Rocky Mountains or in the middle of Alaska, and I set up Blockheadville. And I own the whole kit and caboodle, and I put in roads, and now I encourage people to join. And it depends. Do I sell them the land? Okay, I could. Or I could rent them the land. I own it. I own the whole kit and caboodle. And whatever I decide, I make an offer to you, and you agree or you don't agree. And if you don't agree, I might have to change my offer. Okay, so now your case is a little more complicated because it's a ghost town. Well, a ghost town means that there used to be 500 people living there, and they all left. Well, if they all abandoned it, and I came in there and I mixed my labor with the whole thing, 500 people, I don't know, a square mile, it's conceivable I could own the whole thing. I fixed it all up. I fixed the houses. I fixed the road. Now we have the same thing, the same situation, whether it's virgin territory or territory that I fully own because I homesteaded it, even though it was abandoned 5 years, 50 years ago. The same thing. So now I offer you, I say, Chong, would you like to rent this quarter mile or whatever, or buy it, or whatever the deal I offer, I own it. I can determine the contract, or I make an offer. And now if you accept, we agree. If you don't accept, I might have to change my offer, and then finally we agree. So where's that pushback against the ocean? I now own Lake Pontchartrain. Well, I'm the president of Lake Pontchartrain, and Lake Pontchartrain has got 100,000 stock owners, each owning one share of stock. And now you want to sail your boat in there. I can say, okay, sure, come on in. The water is fine. That'll be $20 for sailing the boat. Where's the problem?
Okay. I guess in my view, the problem of the tragedy of commons is more of poor management rather than say unclear ownership. So the example of say Blockheadville can be seen in history with say early Zionist movement with their settlement of what is now the land of Israel, and they may purchase the land in fair ownership homesteading principle, but because much of early Israel is made up of kibbutzim, so farms that are socially and communally owned, I don't see how they can conflict.
Oh, I see. I misunderstood your problem or your pushback. I'm sorry. Well, that's what conversation is all about. You get clear when you talk. I see what you're saying. What, well, I think I see what you're saying. Let me say it and see if you agree. What you're saying is if the tragedy of commons was such a tragedy, what about the kibbutz? That's a commons.
Basically, yes.
Okay. So we're on the same wavelength now. Before I just misconstrued what you were saying. Well, that's an excellent point. I would say, the average American family or the average Vietnamese family, the mother and the father and two kids, they're a socialist commune. The little girl of 5 years old, she doesn't eat in accordance with her ability to earn income. She eats in accordance with her need. They follow the Marxist notion from each according to his ability, to each according to their need. But it's on a voluntary basis, so it's kosher. Well, the same thing with the kibbutz. uh, you and I are in a kibbutz, and you're young and strong, and I'm old and weak. And you agree to do a little bit more work. I do a little less work, and now I even get more because I'm more needy than you are. I need more medicine. You don't need medicine, and but it's voluntary, so there's no problem. It's not really a commons. It's a partnership. You know who screwed this up? What's her name? Eleanor Ostrom. Eleanor Ostrom is, I think, the first woman to ever win a Nobel Prize in economics. She was a political scientist by background, but people can win a Nobel Prize in economics with any degree or no degree, as far as I'm concerned. But what she did, her whole career was to say that the tragedy of the commons wasn't a tragedy. Uh, she would be sort of on your pushback side. And what she did is she went over a whole bunch of areas in I don't know, maybe in Vietnam fishing, and in the one I remember was in Switzerland, a cow pasture or something like that. And my criticism of her, and I've written 4 or 5 articles on that. So if anyone in your audience wants to pursue this, my email address is wblock, WBLOCK, at Loyno, LOYNO.edu for education. Just email me and I'll send you all of my stuff on Eleanor Ostrom. She confused a partnership with a commons. So let's take this supposed commons in the middle of Switzerland with a bunch of cows. And there are 10 people that all have cows there. And I come in there with my cows. They're not going to let me in there. Look, let's take another case. We're now in a law firm, and the law firm has got a library, and there are 500 partners in the law firm. It's a big company. Uh, and I come in, I'm not a lawyer, and I have nothing to do with the law firm, and I come in there and I want to read a book. They're going to say, "What are you, drunk? This is private property." And yet there are 500 people that own it. So you have to distinguish a partnership like a kibbutz or a family or a law firm or the instances of Eleanor Ostrom from a tragedy of the commons. A tragedy of the commons, anyone can come in there. A partnership, only the partners can come in there. I right now can go in with a rowboat in Lake Pontchartrain. Nobody's going to stop me. That is not a partnership. That's a commons. So I think that I'm right in saying that the tragedy of the commons is a tragedy, and the best efforts of Eleanor Ostrom to undermine this claim and your pushback is wrong, because it doesn't distinguish between an agreed partnership, which is perfectly kosher economically, and a true commons. I mean, take the cow and the buffalo. The cow never went within 1,000,000 miles of extinction. The buffalo almost went extinct. Why? Because you couldn't own privately a buffalo. So if you shot a cow, your cow, you paid a big price. You don't have that cow tomorrow. If you shot a buffalo, you paid nothing because you wouldn't have had that buffalo anyway if you hadn't shot it. So people are shooting them till the cows come home or till the buffalo come home. Getting silly here. I think that the tragedy of the commons is one of the most basic elements of economics, right along there with supply and demand, or interest rates, or time preference, or whatever. I won't say bitterly resist, but strongly resist the idea that the tragedy of the commons is not a tragedy.
Okay. Right. So in the examples of say Blockheadville, early Israel, and all that. So the idea is that it's a partnership made up of the residents rather than say the commons.
Well, Israel probably deserves a whole uh, interview of itself. And I have a book out on that as well.
Yes.
Got a book out on a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so we could spend a few minutes on it, but we're really more into
Of course. Yeah.
water here.
Of course.
On Israel, the issue is, who is the rightful owner of the contested property? Is it the Arabs, the Muslims, or the Jews? And my claim, I also have a co-author here as well, is that the Jews were there 3,000 years ago. The Arabs came in, oh, I don't know, 1,400 years ago, something like that. 700 years BC, something like that. They came in 1,500 years later. What were the Jews doing for 1,500 years before the Arabs came? They weren't twiddling their thumbs. They were mixing their labor with the land. Then the Romans kicked them out, but it wasn't abandoned. The Romans kicked them out, and the Jews were spread out all over the place. And some stayed, but many of them left. And now in 1948, they came back, or they came back before that, a little bit before then. And I would say that if there's a dispute between the land owned by the Jews or the Arabs, the Jews were there first. Let me give you one example of that. The Al-Aqsa, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, the Al-Aqsa Mosque sits on top of the Jewish Second Temple, and the First Temple is even below there. Well, who was there first? The guy in the top or the guy underneath? Obvious, the guy underneath. Various countries have a big hobby. I don't know what the Vietnam. You'll have to tell me what the Vietnamese one. I would guess soccer, but you'll tell me. In the U.S., it's football. In Canada, it's hockey. In many countries, it's soccer. Is it soccer also in?
Yeah, it's
Uh,
a national sport. Yes.
yeah, right. Well, you know what it is in Israel?
You mentioned it
Archaeology.
before, archaeology. Yeah.
Archaeology. The Jews are continually digging down and looking for coins or cloth or this or that, and invariably they find that the Jewish stuff is way below the Arab stuff. So it's not just the Second Temple and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, it's all over the place. In Gaza, in Samaria and Judea, in lots of areas that are contested. The Jews were there first. So if you're a fan of John Locke, as libertarians should be, you should side with the Jews on the question of who is the proper owner of the land.
Okay. Yeah. I think Israel should be a good jumping off point too, because you know, opponents of the legitimacy of the state often shouts this certain slogan that has two natural bodies of water in it. So one is a river and the other is the sea. Um, which those who are more geographically learned than we are can name what those two terms refer to. But in your view, who should
The,
own these
Medi-
two bodies of water?
Mediterranean, the Mediterranean and the Jordan, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right. The Mediterranean on the west and the Jordan River on the east.
Yeah. So,
I'm
who should lay claim to the ownership of these two bodies of water?
Well, oh, to the bodies of water. I thought you were going to ask, well, who should lay claim ownership to the land in between, but you're not asking that.
No, no.
Got it. Well, as for the Mediterranean, the Jews shouldn't own the whole Mediterranean. The west coast of Israel should have a share of it, but there's a coast of Italy, France, I don't know who else, Spain, a lot of countries, and in North Africa also. Egypt should own a bit. So what you should do is go around the periphery of the Mediterranean Sea, and for every for not square mile, for every linear mile of ocean front that you own, you should get one share of the Mediterranean Corporation. and the Israelis should get, I don't know, 3% of it. I don't know what the Israeli coast is of all the coast. Call it 5%, maybe less than that, but it's significant. It's more than 1/10 of 1%. And they should own a little bit of the Mediterranean Sea. And as for the Jordan River, well, the Jews should own half of it, and the people on the other side, assuming that that land too is legitimately theirs, which is another issue, but stipulate that it is. I mean, Israel only goes so far, and once it stops, let's say, for argument's sake, of the Jordan River, well, the Jews should own half of the Jordan River, and the other people should own the other half of the Jordan River. So it would be the same thing, whether with land or with water. Another aphorism I have is that what is it? Land is just slow moving water. Water is fast moving land because land moves too. You have mudslides. You have, what is it? Volcanoes where the land moves. And then you have water that doesn't move much, like an iceberg, or it moves a lot less. So, a lot of people say, well, look, I can understand you can own land. Fine, fine. But water, so what I'm trying to say is that land is slow moving water and water is fast moving land. It's the same thing economically. Before I was saying for the economist, an elephant is the same thing as a whale. I mean, a physiologist is going to have a conniption with me. But now I say the same thing. Land and water are the same. And now I'm going to get in trouble with archaeologists who are going to say, well, no, land and water are different. No, economically, they're the same thing. And they should all be privatized. And the tragedy of the commons works in every area and it should be squelched.
All right. Yeah. So, yeah, you mentioned icebergs. So they stand on the gray middle ground between land and water. But nevertheless, so yeah, who should lay claim to icebergs?
Ah, that's a good one. I didn't contemplate that. Here I have, what is it? Oceans, rivers, lakes, and aquifers. I wanted to put mud puddles in there, but the publisher wouldn't allow mud puddles. But I didn't think of icebergs. So I am very grateful to you for showing a lacuna in the book. And you and I will have to co-author an article about what we should do with icebergs, if you
Oh,
agree with this stuff,
yeah.
because I'm giving you credit for thinking of it. And that's a good one. In the old days, what they would do, I don't know about with icebergs, but what they would do is they would break up ice in Minnesota and they would move it down the Mississippi River down to Louisiana and sell the ice before refrigeration. So I suppose if we have global warming, those icebergs will be valuable. They'll have a lot of ice in them. I really don't know. That's a good one. Maybe they're not scarce yet. Maybe nobody, I don't see anyone fighting over an iceberg. I don't see either two countries or two people both wanting, that's my ice, you know. I do competitive race walking, and in competitive race walking, they always give you safety pins. And what the safety pins you put on a little bib that gives you a number. And once in a while, I'm grabbing into a safety pin and someone else is grabbing, and I'll make a joke. I say, "Oh, I wanted that safety pin." You see what I'm saying? It's a big pile of safety pins, 1,000 safety pins, and they're all the same. So it's just silly to say I wanted that safety pin. So I'm thinking maybe icebergs are like safety pins. Those safety pins are superfluous. I mean, the race organizers supply enough safety pins to choke a horse. So maybe there is no problem over privatizing it because nobody really wants it. And if somebody ever wanted it, the answer would be we go back to John Locke. Whoever's there first gets to own. Now, how much of the iceberg? I mean, when Columbus came and suppose there were no Indians here, could Columbus say, well, I claim the land for the Spain from the Atlantic to the Pacific? No. You have what's called a continuum problem. How much land can you, or water, or iceberg can you homestead by doing what? You have to put a crop in for three seasons, or how intensive does the crop have to be? I'm going to put corn in. Does the corn have to be every square foot, every square yard, every square acre, every square mile, every 10 square miles? uh, there is no solution to the continuum problem. Another continuum problem is the statutory rape age. We know if you go to bed with a 5-year-old girl, you're a statutory rapist, even if she agrees, because we don't think she's capable of any such agreement. You go to bed with a 25-year-old woman and she agrees, you're not a statutory rapist. So where do you draw the line? 15, 17, 19? You can't deduce a number from principles of non-aggression and homesteading. Or right now, I'm going to punch you, and you're in Vietnam, and I'm in New Orleans. And do you have a right to shoot me? Well, obviously, in this context, we're friends. I'm not going to punch you. But how close do I have to get before you can is also a continuum problem. So the issue of how much what do you call it, intensive homesteading you have to do for the iceberg, it doesn't come from libertarian principles. It has to come from some sort of common sense. Like, for example, Murray Rothbard, I think, quite reasonably said, look, east of the Mississippi, the land is very fertile. A family of four, if they homestead it, and get 160 acres. Where do you get 160 acres and not 159 or 161? Got 160. It was arbitrary, but reasonable. And then he said, west of the Mississippi, the land is less fertile, and a family of four needs 1,600 acres. Where did it get 1,600, not 15 or 1,700? Arbitrary, but not entirely unreasonable. And that's the only way we can go. So I say that the statutory rape age is 17. And there are some girls who are younger and more mature than other girls who are older. But if you're going to pick a number, perfection is denied us in issues of like that.
Okay, well, we've got to the very touchy topic of consent regarding to sexual matters, but I don't know how we got there, but I suppose we got there.
Well, we got there because of the continuum. The issue was how much land or water or iceberg do you have to homestead before you can own it? And I'm saying it's the continuum. And then I came up with 5 different issue areas or instances of a continuum to illustrate what is a continuum.
Understood. Okay. All right. Finally, I believe we've touched on this before, but in terms of the, say, oil spills in oceans, say the Deepwater Horizon incident, like, um, is there some way that we can mitigate the disaster caused by it, say, if parts of the ocean are privatized?
Yeah, you're talking about the oil spill,
Yes.
right? Yeah. Well, on my ocean, if you come triple hulled, I'm going to give you a lower price than if you come double hulled. And if you come single hulled, I'm going to charge you more. And if there's rust on your boat, I'm going to charge you a lot more. And if there's a lot of rust, I'm not letting you on my ocean. Similar to the width of the wheel, the wider the wheel, the cheaper. So, and also, if your sea captain is drunk, I'm not going to be a happy camper as the owner of the ocean. I'm going to make a rule if I can anticipate such a grotesque thing. In the Deepwater Horizon case, the captain of the boat was drunk, and the person who was navigating the boat near the Alaska shore was not qualified to navigate there. It was complex. So I think, look, perfection is denied us. There are going to be deaths on private highways. There's going to be loss of life with private oceans and rivers and lakes, and there's going to be oil spills. That's the human condition. We're the mistake-making animal. We get up in the morning, we made a mistake, should have stayed in bed. You stay in bed, that's a mistake. Always mistakes. The benefit of the free enterprise system is fewer mistakes, because as Thomas Sowell said, it's a stupid system to have where you pay no penalty. Well, right now, there was no penalty paid, or, well, they sued them. But it was a very inefficient, ineffective way. And if the owner of the ocean set up some rules saying, the boat has got to be good and the captain can't be drunk and all that stuff, maybe that one would have been eliminated. Maybe not. Maybe under private enterprise it could have occurred. I'm not saying private enterprise will end all errors. private enterprise will have errors, just fewer errors. And what more can we do on this imperfect Earth?
Mhm. Yeah. Just a little follow up. So, I suppose what you're make the case that you're making is say, privatizing the ocean would mitigate or sorry, prevent certain disasters from happening, or at least
I
well,
don't say prevent. I don't say prevent.
okay,
I say reduce.
okay, reduce. So say if a deep water horizon ever happened in say a privatized ocean, then how should we mitigate it?
Well, once it happened, you can't mitigate it. Well, you can't prevent it, but you can uh, uh, have a fee. In other words, you want to have your boat on my ocean? I say, well, if your boat breaks up, I'm going to kick your butt financially. And you agree. Namely, I'm going to take your house and none of this. What is it when you have a corporation, a limited liability corporation? I'm going to say no corporations you want to get on my ocean with a boat? Your house is in danger if you screw up. I'm just saying that's one possible contract that I could make to prevent that in the future and mitigate it afterward, namely punish you for having an oil spill on daring to have an oil spill on my ocean.
Okay. All right.
You rotten kid, you shouldn't have oil spills on my ocean. Go do it on some other person's ocean.
Well, I think that could should be a good note to end on. Hopefully, this conversation has given people some things to think about. Thank you again, Walter Block, for joining the show.
Thanks. Always great to be with you. Let me put in a commercial message. I'm a professor at Loyola University, New Orleans. And if you're thinking of going to a college and want to study with me, apply to Loyola University, New Orleans. Thanks again for having me. And I look forward, if I'm invited, to coming on again because I greatly enjoy interacting with you.
Of course, to be continued.
Take care.